Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of the Cinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film, and this year's podcast media partner for the dCFF 2024 Film Festival. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and today I'm very excited that we're going to be joined by the writer and director of Hail to the Breadsticks. It was named the best Oklahoma feature film by the Oklahoma Film Critics Circle. So we're very excited to speak with the film's writer-director, Donick Cary. We're going to kick things off by talking with Donick a little bit about his journey to learning the history and controversy behind the Washington Redskins. And of course, we'll close out the show by learning when you can watch Hail to the Breadsticks next. And I just wanted to quickly note that if you are enjoying our conversation today, make sure to subscribe to have more exclusive dCFF interviews sent directly to your ears each and every day through the festival, and even follow it the week following the festival. Lots of amazing people here. We're super excited to share the word about their films with you, and you can find the Cinematic Schematic on your podcast player of choice. With that said, let's get to today's movie, Hail to the Breadsticks. Hail to the Breadsticks follows multiple perspectives throughout its story: the innocent questioning of a 9-year-old non-native boy, the open-minded inquiries of a superfan of the team, the Washington Redskins, and most importantly, a broad swath of Native America. I caught this documentary the other evening, and it was a hoot, but it was also very informative, which makes this a film I've been looking forward to talking about the most. So I'm very thrilled to welcome writer-director Donick Cary to the show. Donick, welcome.
Caleb, thank you. Great intro. I'm happy to be here and thrilled about this award. This is incredible.
Yeah, congratulations on being named Best Oklahoma Feature. Are you surprised, shocked? What's the
I am. I mean, we have some great storytellers in our film who are from Oklahoma, so I there's a good, strong connection there for sure. But there's so many incredible films here. We've been really enjoying what dCFF has put together, and took me totally off guard.
Well, congratulations. I think it's a great film. And listeners, again, we're going to talk about how you can watch it more later, but totally worth your time. You are in Oklahoma City. How's your trip to dCFF been so far this year?
I have zero complaints, so that's a good start. We're having a really good time. I was saying earlier, like, we love being at Harkins. It's really great that they've opened up a classic cinema chain to indie cinema.
Yes.
I love seeing that sort of those two worlds collide, and the staff over there running around getting popcorn and going like, who are all these crazy people coming in? It's awesome.
I love it. What are the badges? We don't get badges very often.
Right.
Well, hey, we're thrilled that you made the trek. You again are hail from Los Angeles,
yep.
Correct? And you made the trek all the way here to Oklahoma City.
Yeah, we drove.
Oh, you made the road trip.
Yeah.
How was it?
Couldn't resist. We love it. We love driving back and forth across this very weird country we all live in and eating our way from one coast to the other. It's great.
The food has got to be the best part of the journey in a lot of sense, right?
Food, people, it's these things that unify, which become part of the theme of this movie. But food is one of them. Music, humor are usually the uniters, are what I'm interested in mostly.
I'd love to hear that. Well, I think that's a very timely perspective to keep in mind for the year 2024. I know I gave a synopsis, but for listeners who maybe are not familiar with Hail to the Breadsticks, give me a little bit about your pitch. You were a Washington Redskins super fan, and one day we're like talking to your son about, is this racist? So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about sort of how the inception and where you went from there.
Yeah, so the quick version is, I got the for lack of a better word, man cave. I hate that word, but whatever. We got all the stuff on the walls and the logos and the things and the signed helmets and indoctrinating my son into what has been 50 years of fandom and mostly great memories, though, of course, the Dan Snyder years are fraught with different ups and downs. Anyway, one day, he's about 7. The movie took about 7 years to make, so he's turned into a teenager now, but he was 7 or 8. He was like, Dad, this is really fun, but is it racist? And I was like, I started to just say all the stuff which I've told myself for years about the team and the logo and the name, assuming there's an NFL team with a name. It can't be racist. That would be crazy. And the team has fed me lots of facts. They're 9 out of 10 Native Americans don't care. They've done a poll. It's honoring people, like just things that I could kind of go like, okay, good enough for me. No one's challenging me on it. Like, fine. But when my son challenged me on it, I was like, I don't really know the answer to that for real. And the parenting hat comes out, which is like, you really want to be ultimately a good parent and answer the questions the best you can. And when he asked that, I was like, yeah, my 7-year-old wants to know what racism is. Oh boy, I guess we gotta come up with something. What do we really think about this? And we had a really interesting conversation, and we realized a couple things. One, we didn't know any Native Americans, so that was like a big not like a red flag, but like it's weird to try to answer this and not even know what they really think, only what the team has told us they think. And he said, you know what we should do is we should talk to Real, and then he used the name of the team. We should talk to Real. And I was like, oh, that sounds terrible. I don't think you can say that. And then I was like, well, why am I saying that it's fine and whatever if you can't ask that question? Maybe that's a really good question. So we very naively, almost like on a whim, as like a father and son weekend project, we're like, let's see if we can find any Native Americans that we know or somebody knows and talk to them. And I was like, oh, we might as well record this because this could be really interesting, maybe for a school project for him or something. Maybe we'll learn something. And it quickly just ballooned into something much bigger. The things I was learning were things that I was like, how do I not know this? How are these things? The most basic one was, we were trying to figure out what do they think? And the first thing we found out, which I didn't know, was there's 570 plus federally recognized tribes in America, And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, and they're in Alaska, and they're in Cape Cod, and they're in Oklahoma, and and in San Diego County alone, there's 17 different tribal identities, and each one of these has a slightly different perception of reality, a different spiritual practice, a different history. Some have 13 people hanging on, some have 200,000 on the Navajo res. Like, these are very different ways of seeing the world, and it started to be this thing of like, oh, we're not really asking what they think, because they is about a million different things, which makes a really interesting conversation and a really nuanced conversation, which is there's not a clear answer of like, is a logo good or bad? What is racist or whatever? You have to make these decisions yourself. You have to educate yourself as you go. So that became what the movie started to be about. It's like, well, how does this exist if it does really offend and harm a lot of people, And then how do we get over stuff that we've hung on to for years and not done from only done from a good place? We love our teams. We want to root for our teams. And when we're caught off guard with like being told we're racist, you're like, no way, I'm going to fight for my team. Oh, wait, it's not really about that. Let's take a deep breath. Let's listen. Like you said, that's the biggest lesson I had in all this is like, it really pays to stop and listen, digest. When you feel defensive, don't react. Take a minute,
Yeah. No, I think that just speaks to, your character and just the fact that you have a willingness to be humbled a little bit, because it is very hard whenever again, having seen The Room in the video, you're so invested in the iconography and what this team has meant to you growing up to say, maybe there's a there. Mm-hmm. I just think speaks eons about your character. For listeners who aren't familiar, you have a unique background as a writer on The Simpsons, so comedy writing. How did your writing style shape the way you told Hail to the Breadsticks?
Yeah, I think so The Simpsons was one of many shows I worked on. I was there a while ago now, but one of the like superpowers that I learned from working on a show like that was that humor really helps people lower their guards and talk about stuff that is normally uncomfortable to talk about, and maybe learn something and maybe confront something and stuff. So when the idea for this movie came up, which immediately made me feel very defensive and nervous, I was like, that's probably a good place to find something interesting. Maybe I should lean into that. I knew we had this superpower of comedy to hopefully save us and save me, honestly, and make me sort of feel better as we went into this and have these conversations with people who I thought might hate us. Like we might we went out to enter into ask the question, what is Native America today? And a couple white guys. And we're like, we could get hammered and this could just die right away. Hopefully we could have some laughs,
I had some laughs. I will just speak of my experience. A lot of laughter, a lot of learning, a lot of listening, which was a common theme I found in the film. In terms of, you guys traveled around and interviewed people from all those places that you just mentioned. What was maybe one of your biggest takeaways in terms of talking to the natives, in terms of like either whether it be the diversity of opinion? What was sort of like the thing you kept hearing that has stuck with you?
I think the biggest thing, and there's these sort of funny things, it's in we have probably 50 speakers in the film who from all over the Native American experience. So there's a lot of different opinions. But the thing that I thought was funny in a dry way is Paul Schatt-Smith, who's curator at the Smithsonian American Indian Museum, said that the real experiment he's trying to do is convince people that Native Americans are human, just like everybody else, which means they have lots of opinions. They make mistakes just like everybody else. They might, and that's what we were finding. Some people didn't mind the team. more people really didn't like the team, but that the team wasn't really the thing. It was like these bigger reasons why those opinions existed and stuff like invisibility and representation, these sort of bigger themes. But yeah, what was surprising to me was how many people welcomed us into whether their homes. We had to go as far as Pine Ridge Reservation or Navajo, the Navajo Res, spend time there to realize there's 200,000 people in Los Angeles, right, who like go to coffee shops with us and go like, oh, right, what are we doing? Like, this is crazy. There's 10 million plus Native Americans in America today. They're everywhere. They're just like everybody else. It's not that hard to figure out. But the history has made many of these issues silenced and many of their stories erased, invisible. It's very hard for those to penetrate into pop culture. So, I think the surprising thing for us was also just like, wow, what true invisibility is. And meeting people, Tommy Orange described it as being, living in this hundreds of years of a post-apocalyptic world and being in the room and going like, I'm standing right here and no one even sees me. Like, like I'm saying I don't like the name, but it just stays. We're saying these stories are important. We're talking about boarding schools. No one wants to talk about it, issue after issue.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing here too is the fact that there's not just a singular opinion. Like you said, there are people just like us. There's lots of different opinions depending on what nation individuals are from, I'm sure is a part of it, or just them on an individual level, but it's not a monolith of,
right,
hey, this is the Native opinions and Native stance on all things, and we represent all Natives. It's a little more complicated, which I thought you did a great job highlighting a variety of folks in your film.
Yeah, that became really important to us, was like, we'd meet, there's so many people who also we ended up not making the cut, but we'd like meet a skateboarder who's from the Navajo Res who lives in LA, and we're like, well, we got to include her. She's amazing, and we'd spend a day with her and we'd get to know her, and then, but there started to be like, oh, there's millions and millions of stories. This movie can't really cover everything. And there's millions of stories in history that hasn't been told that like, we can't do that either. It's not really, and the delicate balance of understanding, like we're white filmmakers. We loved that we stumbled into the Dances of Wolves of it all, which was like, that movie is both, wonderful. We talked to a lot of natives who love it, grew up on it. We're like, there's finally some native representation out there. And this was done relatively sensitively with good costumes and, some consultation with tribal members, et cetera. But it is fundamentally still a white savior story, and they wander off, and then the natives disappear at the end, and sort of. And we were like, are we going right down this path? It's just like a couple white guys going into Native America to like make us feel better about our team.
Did you have a lot of gut checks along the way where you're like, should I still be making this? I mean, you said 7 years. I imagine there had to have been a lot of times throughout that process where you're like, why am I doing this? Is this the right thing to do?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, my gut at the beginning when Otis was like, was what asked the question was like, it probably is, but if we don't ask the question, we don't have to deal with it. And then it was like, he asked, I was like, oh, now I got to deal with it. All right, let's find a fun way to deal with it. Maybe an educational, maybe an interesting way. We can have some laughs, have some great. And then what happened was, probably 2 years into making this, we'd met a bunch of people. We're having a pretty good time and, under like changing the way we saw our team and what we might be able to do. And we thought maybe part of our mission was figuring out if we were okay with the name change, and then that would maybe help sway the fan base to be okay with a name change, which would be then part of this effort to change the name. In the middle of it, George Floyd happened. So the crazy thing is this tragedy had to happen for there a much bigger racial conversation to happen in the country. And what happened in the aftermath of that, which is, this thing with America is we swing back and forth instead of like, let's have a sensible conversation, move forward a little and then move a little and then keep, but things like Uncle Ben's Rice and Aunt Jemima and Edmonton Eskimos, like names that were just dropping like flies, and the team was still hanging onto their name. In fact, they got really slammed on, I think it was Black Thursday. There was like a day where everyone posted a black screen.
Yes, of course.
Instagram. Yeah. And the Washington football team, still with their name, was like, we support our black players. It was like,
whoa.
And then the list of comments under that was like 3,000 people were like, you're not allowed to, you can't do this, whatever. And I was like, oh man.
PR disaster. Whoopsie.
Right. You got to be careful if you're a brand with your brand.
Are you being intellectually honest with yourself, Redskins? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So then the team dropped their name. FedEx, was going to pull out. And so in the middle of the movie, we were kind of like, I think our movie might be done. And I mean, like that was the point, right? And do we need to even keep making this? But then the way the team dropped their name was not out of some awakening, which, or some like lesson or something. And what we were finding is we were meeting people, getting this nuanced conversation with them, having these friends that would be embarrassed to hang logos in our room and have them over to watch a game. And we were like, how come the fan base isn't getting that? Like the NFL isn't doing that. They're just going like, we got to change. It's a financial decision. Dan Snyder's a bad guy, whatever. And you're like, well, that's unfortunate. And then we realized then other things started to happen. Like a friend of mine from The Simpsons, Hank Azaria, was called out for doing the voice of Apu. There is a nuanced conversation to have about that. People were really want to support The Simpsons. Like, you can't change The Simpsons. Like people wanted to defend things they love. Mm-hmm. But Hank did a really impressive thing, which he was like, he was defensive. He was nervous. He stopped for a minute. He talked to people who were upset about it. He started to have a bigger understanding of how it was upsetting to people. And then he was okay with letting it go. That was like, oh, that's exactly what we're doing. Wait, all of these are templates for people who are challenged with things that are challenging. We have to change and evolve or we're doomed. That's what we're here. That's part of like how we're wired. And so we started to go like, oh, this movie is actually really about how we process change and we're okay. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's a template there for other people who are dealing with this. And you can have some laughs doing it. And we showed it to some people who are like, oh my God, thank God I can show this. My daddy's a huge fan of the team. He still doesn't know why they changed the name. I'm like, great, share our adventure. Maybe you'll feel a little better,
Do you feel like this is a great, because, and I actually want to ask you a little bit more about just in terms of the feedback you got from some of the native or indigenous folks here in a minute. But yeah. I'm thinking about like, do you feel like there is an audience for this where you really can genuinely break through and say, hey, I was exactly where you are, and here's the journey I went on? Is that hopeful for you? Is that kind of the aim for the film, is to try to like help reinforce these things for people?
Yeah, it's tough. I think part of our job as storytellers is to break through some of the is to hopefully educate through fun stories or interesting stories or et cetera. It's boring. I've always used comedy, so it's a very different version of that. But, this is where we are right now is in for whatever reason in history is we're in a really divisive time where we're sort of encouraged to pick sides and be angry about somebody else who's out there. And I hate that. It's not how I want to raise my kids. It's not how I want to interact with other people. In general, you drive back and forth across this country, you're like, there's a lot of good people here. They everybody means well. They want to raise their kids. They want to have food on the table, et cetera. There's very basic things. Sorry, I'm off topic a little bit, but I did want the movie to be, to appeal to as big an audience as it can. We had a lot of potential red flags for people in like, oh, change and political correctness and like PC wokeness or whatever. And I was like, I don't care about that stuff. I don't want to get into that stuff. All I can do is share what we did and went through and why we got there. I'm certainly not going to change anything if I thought it was stinky or for somebody else's cause or something. I'm just like, no, we did it because we met cool people.
Well, and you're asking really on. I mean, at least from what I could tell, sitting as an audience member, it seemed like there was a really genuine intellectual honesty about, hey, I really don't know about this, or I don't even know the people I'm supposed to ask about this.
Yeah.
So, like, where do I even start with that? And you were talking about the fact that you didn't know any Native people at the beginning of the process here. Similarly, I know in my household we didn't either. But it's like, well, we can talk about people, but until you really know and ask them, do we really know? And you kind of went on that journey and got multiple perspectives to kind of add some maybe nuance. So I guess my question is, the question in the long way of saying, do you hope that this film provides some nuance for people who maybe are a little more black and white when they think about things like the Redskins or brand names being, political, air quotes, politically correct?
Yes, totally. And I think the hardest thing in this movie or not in this movie, but in pop culture to understand or to start to get a sense of is like, we're trained to root for our teams and fight for them at all costs. In a sports context, in a fun bubble of sports, we can hate the Cowboy fans. It's not, we don't want them, put in jail. We want to yell at them on game day because it's
win.
fun. Yeah. We just want to beat them. That's all. They're idiots. Sorry, they're not idiots. They could be nice. I'm sure there's nice Cowboy fans, but yeah, the point is once you start to understand how this gets out of that context, for us it doesn't. It's not about that. But if you're Native American and every time you see the name, it's another sign of your erasure, that you don't exist, that you're not in the room, that you don't have a presence in pop culture other than a team owned by Dan Snyder who makes a bunch of money and tells you he's honoring you and you should just shut up. It's that starts to be a different thing. And then you're like, oh, I don't want to participate in that. That actually doesn't feel good. It feels good to root for my team, but not if my team has suddenly been distorted into this thing that once somebody else said, that's really actually harmful to us, and then we started to see studies about how children, Native children are raised with mascots in the thing, or talk to, Sterling Harjo from Oklahoma City here talked about going to a school in his high school, playing other teams that had native mascots. And he made all the posters, and then he's writing posters against Indians. And he's like, what, Stephen Paul Judd, also from here, went to was a Broken Bow Savage, is where he went to school. And he's like, Savage. I don't know.
I thought there's a moment, I don't want to spoil it too much, but he says, but what if I applied the same logic to a different group of people? How would that feel to that people, And it really puts it into context, like, that's not okay.
That helped us a lot was the we have, again, it's funny. It's which things do we want to spoil or not? But we had a number of people point out that the R word really for them was like the N word.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, well, that's weird. For me, it's not, it's a sports team name. And yet as we started to explore that, it became more and more like, wow, it's really weird for us to go and tell them about our football team. Cause for them, it's like, I think the version that, was kind of the kindest. Paul Schatt-Smith explained, there's Indian motorcycles everywhere. You would not have one. With any other name on it, any other race as a motorcycle, and just drive around, and that would not be okay. So anyway, that was all really eye-opening for us and helped drive it home.
So you mentioned a few of the folks here from Oklahoma. You had obviously dozens, if not, probably nearing 100 interviews, dozens of folks that you talked to during the filmmaking process. I'm curious about in the editing room. So did you guys have natives weighing in on your different edits of it? What was that collaboration like for you?
Yeah. So early on, we brought in Seeing Red Media, who are this dude Stevie Salas helped make Rumble, Indians Who Rock the Res, I think was the whole title. Great movie, was a winner at Sundance of maybe 5 years ago. And what I loved about that movie was they really found this theme of look at all these Native American rock stars who are heroes to those of us who love rock and roll. How come they're basically invisible in the history of music? But it's not they decided not to tell it in a sad way. They were like, they're rock stars. Let's just enjoy the rock stars and start illuminating that. And we were like, that's really cool. He works with a guy named Brian Porter. They have a company, Seeing Red. So we brought them in as producing partners. They're Native American. We have another great consultant, Joey Clift, who's a comedian, podcaster, who I interviewed pretty early on and then ended up going like, oh, Joey might know the answer to this. Joey might know. And then it just was sort of organically became like, let's just make you a consultant on this, and we really found that overall that as we were going through the movie, there was this snowball effect of we'd interview Stephen Paul Judd, and then we're like, it'd be cool if he made an art piece that could be part of the movie and then he'd just be making art for, it just became a bigger and bigger production, which was really the theme for us. Everything changed as we met people. And then they all became part of the movie. I think of it as I was growing up, there were Rodney Dangerfield movies, Back to School or whatever. And it seemed like every one of those movies would be he had a bunch of adventures. And then at the end, he's like, hey, let's all get together and party. That's what this felt like naturally. It's we're going to learn a bunch of stuff. And by the end, we're all at a party together.
You literally have a party together in the movie.
We do. We were like, we have to just do a Rodney Dangerfield ending, sort of. And we sort of do.
Oh, man. Well, I think it's the movie is so much fun. I found it to be really clever, very thoughtful, and I hope listeners will check it out, especially if they're just genuinely not familiar with the history of the name Washington Redskins. Well, we're about to wrap up, but I want to bring it back to sort of the origin or the beginnings of the film, which is a conversation with you and your son.
Mm-hmm.
How would you say this film helped you grow closer, grow alongside your son as he's grown into the 7 years teenager status now?
I mean, we had so many adventures making this, like the difference between if we had watched football every Sunday for 7 years and the amount of like travel, hard conversations, fun, late night hamburgers in the middle of Shiprock, Arizona, like just that stuff is you can't write it, you can't replace it, you can't craft it. I remember one of our first nights, someone was like, "Oh, this dude Randall will meet you at Window Rock, which is at the heart of the Navajo Res, and it's sort of this place, and he can help you get some interviews." And we didn't get there till 11 at night. And he's like, "I can get a few people to meet you in like an hour." And I was like, "All right, what about my son?" He's like 7. He's like, "He can play video games with my son." And so Otis drove off down the road to Randall's. I was like, "There he goes. He's off on the res. I don't know where he's going."
Latchkey status.
Yeah. And he had like 3 hours of video games at midnight to 3. I was like, "This is insane. What are we doing?"
Great dad. I think that's great dad status right
but
there.
But these are things he'll never, how could he ever replace that? So one other thing just to mention is like, I also think you don't have to be a sports fan. You don't have to be like, this movie I think really can work as a father-son story for people. It can really work as a sports examination, but it's also funny. There's a lot of Simpsons, and also as an exploration of Native America. So there's a lot of ways to access it. And we hope all of those audiences come and bring their thoughts to the conversation we're hoping to spark.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I think this is a conversation starter movie for sure. Congrats on winning Best Oklahoma Feature this year. So 2 final questions. Number 1, the credits roll.
Yeah.
Lights come up. What do you hope attendees of the film take away from the movie, or at least are thinking about when they walk out of the theater?
A couple. So I've shared it with a number of Native American friends who are in it. This movie takes us into some uncomfortable places, whether you're a fan of the team or whether you're Native American. Both of those audiences are going to feel a little uncomfortable at different times. What made me feel so good at the end was of watching it with Native American friends is they said, "Oh my God, you presented us as funny, as interesting, as cool. Like it's not a tragedy story. It's a story that is ends up being fun and full of laughter." They were really excited. I was like, yes, that is what I wanted to make sure we did, was like actually honor the people who spent their time teaching us stuff, So that felt great. And on the flip side of it, I would love for fans of the team to come away going like, wow, cool. I feel better about this name change. I'm okay with it. I can still root for the team, and cool. We're okay.
You can still root for the team and not like the old name. Right.
And just be okay with, and still love Joe Theismann and John Riggins, and not like, oh, we have to give up something or we were bad people. It's not about that. We're all good people. We all had a great team. We still have a great team, and it's going to be okay. We're going to go for it, and we're going to win again eventually now that Dan Snyder's gone.
Hey, man, I as not an NFL fan, I'm cheering you on there. And we've been asking this question to all of our deadCenter guests this year. What would you say is your favorite film-going memory? And it could be a movie itself, or it could just be an experience that you have with someone that matters a lot to you.
I somebody else asked me this, and I tanked it so badly because I couldn't remember the names of the 2 films I was trying to reference. God, we've had so many wonderful movie experiences. It's just such a part of my DNA and life. I had a funny childhood in that my parents were divorced, and I would spend Friday with my mom and Saturday with my dad. And there was one tiny theater on the little island I grew up on. And Friday night I'd go to the movie with my mom, whatever it was. And Saturday I'd go again with my dad. And they played a lot of art films. So it was like, we'd see Raging Bull and Amarcord and whatever. And I was just like, I guess we're going again. The one that flashes to me, because my daughter is right here, Amity's sitting with us, is we recently went and saw Blue Velvet in a theater at a revival. And it was just like, I love that movie so much. I love David Lynch so much. And sharing it with her and watching her watch it again and have it, impact her the way it impacted me when I was her age. It's awesome. That generational thing's amazing.
That's an incredible choice, by the way. Blue Velvet is an all-timer. For the people it clicks with, it's a special one.
There's something about the mix of horror and humor that Lynch gets, which is really a part of what the American, and as is what this story we're telling too, touches on a little bit of like, right, there's horrific things here, but we can still laugh and figure it out. And Lynch does it beautifully.
Well, hey, I think That's a great answer, and we are unfortunately out of time. But Donick Cary, thanks so much for joining the Cinematic Schematic Day. Thanks for coming to dCFF Film Festival, and congrats for the third time on the win. Where can people follow Hail to the Breadsticks following the festival?
So hail to the breadsticks.org is our website. Hail to the Breadsticks on socials. You can find us. We're just getting out. This is the second time we've shown it to anyone. So we're excited. We're hoping to launch it by the fall, next football season. Stay in touch and let us know if anyone wants to see it. We're happy to come show the movie.
Oh, awesome. Well, listeners, check it out. Add it to your list. For all other things dCenter, you can head over to deadcenterfilm.org. Well, Donick Cary, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Caleb. That was great. Loved it.
Awesome. And listeners, thank you. We'll catch you again next time.